I was in the middle of helping a customer choose the perfect gift when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and froze. The message read, "I'm done with us. I'm leaving for Jacksonville with my new girlfriend, and I just emptied our joint account." The words hit me like a thunderclap, but my hands stayed steady. My voice didn't falter as I wrapped the package in our boutique's signature paper. I waited until the customer left before I quietly typed back, "Good luck. My name is Anna. I'm 40 years old and I own a small boutique in Atlanta. I've poured over a decade of my life into this business, nurturing it from a tiny shop into a thriving brand. My marriage to Tom lasted 14 years, but I had no idea it would end like this, with a cold text that shattered everything I thought was stable. That afternoon, standing behind the counter, I felt the familiar buzz of the shop around me, the soft chatter of customers, the rustle of fabric, the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee. None of it could prepare me for the brutal message sitting on my phone screen. I read it again, almost disbelieving I'm leaving for Jacksonville with my 22-year-old girlfriend. I've taken all the money from our joint account. No call, no warning, just a digital declaration that our life together was over. As the words settled in, I caught the briefest flicker of tightness around my eyes. But I forced myself to stay composed. My customer smiled politely, unaware that my world had just been upended. I handed her the wrapped package and wished her a good day. Only then did I allow myself to breathe deeply and think about what came next. In those 12 years of marriage, Tom and I built a life that felt secure. We shared dreams, built routines, and supported each other, or so I believed. Running this boutique has been my passion and my livelihood. From early mornings to late nights, I was there every step of the way, personally selecting every piece and curating a collection that brought joy to my clients. My work was not just a job, it was my identity. Yet that text shattered more than just our relationship. It cracked the foundation of trust I had in the man I married. The casual cruelty of those words, the thoughtless way he chose to end what we shared, it was a betrayal that cut deep. But I knew this wasn't the moment to break down. I needed to act with clarity and strength. I put my phone down, closed the register, and locked the shop for the day. Behind that calm exterior, I was already processing the layers of hurt and disbelief. I reminded myself that I wasn't alone. I had built something strong here, something no one could take away with a careless text. That night, I sat in my quiet home and stared at the message again. I let myself feel the weight of it, but refused to let it control me. I was determined to respond not with tears, but with resolve. Tomorrow, I would start planning the next chapter of my life, one where I took back control piece by piece. Looking back now, that moment was a turning point, the day I realized that betrayal could not define me. It was the moment I chose strength over sorrow and action over despair. The text from Tom was meant to hurt me, but instead it sparked a fire I didn't know I had. The truth is that text message didn't come out of nowhere. I had been sensing the cracks in our marriage for months before Tom decided to send that cold final message. At first, the signs were subtle, easy to dismiss, but over time, they became impossible to ignore. I started noticing Tom's sudden obsession with the gym, long hours there, frequent new workout gear, and a confidence that seemed out of place for a man his age. His phone habits changed too. Passwords I used to know were suddenly off limits. When I asked about his late nights at work, his stories never quite matched up. One night, I found a receipt tucked away from an upscale restaurant for a dinner for two, on a night he swore he was working late. That was the first moment I really started paying attention. I opened our joint bank statements and saw strange transactions, hotel stays I hadn't been told about, unexplained cash withdrawals. Something wasn't right. I won't lie, it was painful to suspect Tom was hiding something. But I also knew I had to protect myself. That same week, I quietly opened a new bank account at a different institution. I started moving my personal savings over out of reach, away from the joint account Tom still controlled. When he suggested combining our accounts to simplify finances, I agreed cheerfully, all the while knowing I was securing a safety net just in case. By then, I was keeping detailed records of every suspicious charge and transaction. It was like piecing together a puzzle, preparing for the day I would need this evidence. It was a strange feeling, part heartbreak, part steely determination. I wasn't sure where Tom was going with all this, but I knew I had to be ready for whatever came. I was no longer naive to the changes in his behavior. 3 months before the text, I had already consulted a lawyer. It was a hard decision to plan for a potential divorce before it happened, but I needed to be realistic. When a few unexpected hotel charges appeared on our credit card, I told the lawyer I wanted to be prepared to act quickly. I documented everything: suspicious deposits that never matched his claimed work hours, purchases that didn't make sense, sudden changes in his habits. I was quietly collecting evidence, building a case to protect myself and my assets. I can't say I enjoyed this process, but I believed in being practical. I believed in safeguarding the years I had invested in my boutique and in my home. I knew that if things fell apart, I couldn't afford to be caught off guard. When Tom finally sent that message announcing his new girlfriend and emptying our joint account, I wasn't shocked. In a way, I was ready. I had a plan. I had a lawyer on speed dial. I had the proof to back up every suspicion. This preparation gave me power. I wasn't a victim waiting to be hurt. I was a woman ready to defend everything she had worked for. And that knowledge made all the difference. Looking back, I'm grateful for that foresight. It wasn't easy to confront the possibility of betrayal, but it allowed me to stand firm when the storm hit. Because sometimes the quiet moments of preparation are what keep you steady in the face of chaos. And for me, those months of vigilance were the foundation that helped me rise after the fall. After that initial brutal message, the texts didn't stop. If anything, Tom seemed eager to make sure I knew exactly how little respect he had left for me. His messages were dripping with condescension and cruel jabs aimed at undermining my confidence and making me question myself. One text read, "Don't bother begging Anna. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll have my things sent over later." Melissa was the new receptionist at his office, someone I had met briefly at a company event and who had clearly caught his eye. She was young, fresh-faced, and apparently the reason Tom had chosen to end our marriage so abruptly. I watched how Melissa laughed too loudly at his jokes, how she casually touched his arm when she thought no one was looking. Naive enough to believe she was special, she didn't realize she was stepping into a situation that had been unraveling for months. But I didn't respond to Tom's messages. Instead, I did something I should have done long before I called my lawyer. The woman I trusted had already been waiting in the wings, prepared with paperwork and strategies, since I first noticed the unusual charges on our accounts. "It's time," I said simply. "He just made his move." My lawyer promised to file the divorce papers first thing the next morning. "Do you want me to have him served in Jacksonville?" she asked. I said no rush. Let him think he had won. I knew better. I had spent months quietly preparing for this moment. Every suspicious transaction, every secret dinner, every unexplained expense was documented and ready to be used as evidence. Tom's next texts were equally biting. "I know this must be hard for you," he wrote. "You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." The little shop. The boutique I had painstakingly built from the ground up, a business that generated more income than his comfortable office job ever had. The one I funded myself with sweat and countless long hours. I smiled at the irony as I thought about the certified letters my lawyer would soon be sending him in Jacksonville. Let him enjoy his moment of false victory. That evening, I sat in our home, a house I had inherited from my grandmother, kept in my name, despite his repeated requests to add him to the deed. Another smart decision that was about to pay off. As I organized the paperwork my lawyer would need, I found our wedding album. Tom looked so different back then, younger, more genuine. The midlife crisis that had overtaken him was evident now in his ill-fitting clothes and awkward attempts to stay youthful. My phone buzzed again, more messages from Tom, each one more belittling than the last. "Melissa gets me in ways you never could," he bragged. "Maybe you'll find someone your own age." He claimed our family agreed we had grown apart, making it sound like a mutual polite separation. I took screenshots of every message, saving them as ammunition for the legal battle ahead. His own words were digging him deeper into a hole he couldn't climb out of. When I read his casual admission of premeditation, I felt a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't just a breakup, it was an admission of betrayal, and I was ready to hold him accountable. That night, I also noticed a text about the joint credit card. "BTW, I used the card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift." I immediately called the credit card company and reported fraud. The representative was efficient and understanding as I gave details of the charges: 2 first-class tickets to Jacksonville and hotel reservations I hadn't approved. I asked to remove Tom as an authorized user immediately. By the time Tom and Melissa reached the airport, their tickets were invalidated and their hotel bookings canceled. His grand escape was crumbling before it even began. One of the biggest advantages I had going into this was the careful way I managed my finances and property over the years. I always insisted on keeping my business and personal assets separate from Tom's. Some might call it cautious or even cold, but it turned out to be the smartest decision I ever made. The house we lived in had been in my family for generations. I inherited it from my grandmother and made sure it remained in my name alone, despite Tom's repeated suggestions that we add him to the deed. He never understood why I was so protective of it. I now know he thought it was just stubbornness or mistrust, but it was actually foresight. Similarly, my boutique was entirely under my ownership. I funded every dollar, made every business decision, and maintained all financial records meticulously. Tom often complained that I spent too much time working and called it a hobby, something to be tolerated rather than respected. He couldn't see the hard work, the late nights, or the sacrifices behind the scenes. When he emptied our joint account and tried to claim a share of my business during the divorce proceedings, he was in for a rude awakening. Because I had kept detailed documentation, business licenses, bank statements, tax returns, and investment records, I was able to clearly demonstrate that the boutique was my separate property. That distinction mattered deeply. Marital assets are usually split during divorce, but assets held separately, especially those acquired before marriage or inherited, can often remain with the original owner. My lawyer explained this clearly and helped me gather the evidence needed to protect what was mine. During the court hearings, I could see the surprise on Tom's face when the judge reviewed the deeds and corporate documents. He had assumed everything was shared equally, or at least that he could claim half, simply by virtue of being my husband. But the law, backed by my preparation, told a different story. I had made a point of maintaining strict separation, keeping personal and business bank accounts separate, documenting every investment made before and during our marriage, and never mixing funds unnecessarily. That made it impossible for Tom to stake a legitimate claim on the boutique or the house. This careful separation was not about mistrust, it was about protecting myself and my future. After all, no one expects a marriage to fail, but the reality is that sometimes relationships end and you have to be ready. Tom's arrogance had made him believe he could just walk away with half of everything, but my preparation and legal safeguards ensured that he could only walk away with what was rightfully his personal possessions and not a penny more. Knowing that my home and business were secure gave me peace of mind in the middle of a very painful time. It was a reminder that while emotions can cloud judgment, smart planning and clear records provide a safety net when life takes unexpected turns. As I watched Tom's messages come in trying to negotiate a fair payment for my half of the boutique or claim rights to the house, I simply forwarded everything to my lawyer. I didn't need to engage, the facts spoke for themselves. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, savoring the quiet strength that came from knowing I had protected what was mine. The years of dedication to my boutique and the legacy of my family home were safe no matter what Tom tried to do. In the end, it wasn't bitterness that sustained me, it was the knowledge that I had done everything I could to safeguard my future. And that made all the difference. As the days passed after Tom's abrupt departure, the messages he sent only grew more brazen. His texts weren't just cold, they were boastful, as if he wanted to make sure I understood exactly how little he cared about what we once had. He openly admitted that he had planned everything for months. "Melissa understands me in ways you never could," he wrote. "You'll be fine. Maybe even find someone closer to your age." The cruelty of those words stung deeply, but instead of breaking me, they fueled my resolve. I began to document everything. Every text, every message, every careless admission became a piece of evidence. I took screenshots and saved them, carefully organizing the files with dates and times. This wasn't just about protecting myself financially, it was about holding him accountable for the damage he was causing. His own words revealed a premeditated plan. He bragged about emptying our joint account using our shared credit card to book flights and hotels for his getaway with Melissa. It was as if he didn't realize I was watching, or maybe he thought I wouldn't have the strength to fight back. One particularly galling text said, "Consider the charges on the card my parting gift." I knew then that I had to act fast. I contacted the credit card company, reported the fraud, and had the card canceled immediately. Tom's plans unraveled as the airline canceled their tickets, and the hotel reservations vanished. Collecting this evidence gave me a sense of control. It was no longer a matter of guesswork or suspicion, I had proof of his intentions and actions. These messages would play a crucial role in the divorce proceedings, showing the court the extent of his betrayal. His arrogance made him careless, and that was my advantage. Each new text was another admission, another mistake on his part. I forwarded them all to my lawyer, who began building a solid case against him. In a way, Tom's texts were his undoing. They laid bare the truth of his betrayal, removing any doubt or ambiguity. No longer was this just a messy breakup, it was financial misconduct, and the law would see it as such. While Tom reveled in what he thought was his victory, I quietly prepared to fight for what was mine. The evidence in my hands was strong, and I knew the truth would come out in court. These messages weren't just words on a screen, they were the key to protecting my future and proving that I was stronger than he ever imagined. The moment I saw Tom's text about using our joint credit card to book flights and hotel rooms for his escape, I knew I had to act immediately. I couldn't afford to let him get away with that kind of blatant fraud. Without hesitation, I picked up the phone and called the credit card company. Explaining the situation calmly, I informed the representative that there had been unauthorized charges on our card, 2 first-class plane tickets to Jacksonville, and hotel bookings for a luxury resort, all made without my consent. I requested that the charges be investigated and the card canceled immediately. The customer service agent was professional, but I could hear a hint of satisfaction in her voice, as if she understood the gravity of the fraud I was reporting. She confirmed that she would remove Tom as an authorized user, effectively cutting him off from further misuse of our finances. Knowing that those flights and hotel reservations would no longer be valid gave me a sense of relief. Tom and Melissa would arrive at the airport to find their plans abruptly canceled, a significant blow to their carefully crafted escape. This wasn't just about reclaiming money. It was about sending a message that betrayal and theft wouldn't be tolerated. I wanted him to understand that every reckless move he made was being watched and challenged. I also took the time to review all our shared accounts and credit lines. Wherever possible, I transferred funds to accounts he couldn't access and updated passwords and security settings. Every step was calculated to protect what remained from being drained. The following morning, as I arrived at my boutique to open for the day, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Tom's texts ranged from anger to desperation, pleading for answers about the canceled tickets and reservations. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on my work, unpacking new designer handbags and arranging displays for the day. Business had to go on. Life had to move forward even when someone you once trusted chose to betray you so completely. Meanwhile, word spread through his family about Tom's reckless behavior. His mother called me, trying to explain his actions, blaming me for being controlling and cold. But when I asked if Tom had mentioned emptying our joint account or charging the trip on the shared card, she fell silent. That call only strengthened my conviction. Their denial and excuses couldn't erase the proof I held: documented messages, bank statements, and canceled transactions. As Tom's texts grew more frantic, I remained steady. I forwarded every message to my lawyer without replying, letting his own words build the case against him. Protecting myself financially wasn't just a necessity. It was a form of empowerment. It reminded me that I could take control of my life again, even when faced with such betrayal. As the divorce process unfolded, Tom's true desperation became clear. He started making demands, trying to claim a share of my boutique business, insisting that he was my partner and had invested money and effort into it. He also tried to stake a claim on the house, the one I'd inherited from my grandmother, and kept solely in my name. I listened quietly as his texts and calls came in, each more unreasonable than the last. Tom's sense of entitlement shocked me. After everything, he seemed to think he could just take a chunk of what I had built with my own hands. But I was prepared. My lawyer and I had spent months gathering every piece of evidence needed to prove my sole ownership of both the boutique and the house. From tax returns to property deeds, every document was in order. I had kept strict separation of finances, always careful to fund the business personally and to avoid mixing personal and marital assets. When Tom's lawyer raised his claims in court, our side countered methodically. We showed the judge detailed records, bank statements, business licenses, invoices, all in my name alone. We proved the house had never been jointly owned and the business had been established well before our marriage. The judge listened intently as Tom's lawyer argued, but it was clear that the evidence was overwhelming. The court was not about to reward someone who had deliberately misused joint funds and betrayed the marriage. Tom's frustration grew visible as the reality sank in. He realized this battle was not going to be an easy victory. For the first time, he saw that his assumptions about entitlement and partnership didn't hold up against the law or the facts. Throughout the proceedings, I remained calm and composed, focusing on the bigger picture. I wasn't just fighting to keep my assets. I was fighting to protect my future and the legacy I wanted to leave behind. His claims were dismissed, and the court reaffirmed my exclusive rights to the boutique and the house. The joint assets were frozen pending final decisions, and Tom was ordered to return any funds he had wrongfully taken. While Tom struggled to grasp the legal and financial realities, I found strength in knowing that my careful planning had shielded me. I had protected not just my possessions, but my independence. Despite his protests and attempts to rewrite the narrative, the court saw through it all. His late-stage claims that he had been my partner, or that the business was marital property, fell flat in the face of clear, documented evidence. In the end, Tom was left with only his personal belongings and a car that was worth far less than the debts he carried. The house and business, the two things I treasured most, remained firmly mine. This chapter of the divorce was a lesson in how vital it is to keep clear records and protect separate assets. It also proved that even in the most painful betrayals, preparation and prudence can make all the difference. When the court hearing finally began, I felt a mixture of nerves and quiet confidence. I knew we had the evidence: the months of documentation, the trail of suspicious transactions, and Tom's own messages admitting to financial misconduct. I was ready to present the truth. Walking into the courtroom, I noticed Tom dressed in the same flashy clothes he had bought to impress Melissa, his new girlfriend. He looked uncomfortable under the harsh lights, clearly out of his depth. Melissa waited outside her youthful presence, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere inside. My lawyer laid out the case with precision, showing the judge the evidence of Tom's deliberate emptying of our joint accounts, his unauthorized use of shared credit cards, and his history of hiding expenses. The judge listened carefully, asking pointed questions about each piece of evidence. Tom's lawyer tried to paint him as a man acting rashly, but not maliciously, suggesting my own actions were vindictive and overly calculated. But my lawyer calmly countered, explaining that prudence and careful protection of assets aren't vindictiveness, they're smart business and necessary self-protection. The judge examined the property deed, the boutique's corporate papers, and the detailed separation of finances I had maintained. It became clear that my assets were legally mine and that Tom's claims to the business or house had no merit. When the judge addressed Tom directly, the tension in the room was palpable. "You admitted to intentionally emptying the joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a trip with your girlfriend," the judge said. "Do you deny this?" Tom shifted uncomfortably but had no credible denial. His admission was on record in his own texts. The judge's gaze was steady and unyielding as she continued. "You also claim rights to property that, according to documentation, is separate from marital assets. How do you respond to this?" Tom's attempts to justify his actions as a clean break were met with firm skepticism. The judge made it clear that financial fraud would not be tolerated. She ordered the freezing of all shared assets pending final divorce settlement and demanded that Tom return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. The courtroom felt like a turning point, a moment where justice recognized the careful planning and evidence I had brought forward. Tom's cocky attitude gave way to quiet panic as he realized his gamble had failed. I left the courtroom feeling a sense of relief and quiet triumph. The judge's ruling didn't just protect my assets, it validated my strength and resilience in the face of betrayal. This hearing wasn't just about money or property. It was about standing up for myself when someone I trusted chose to break that trust. It was about showing that preparation and honesty would prevail over deception. The legal battle was far from over, but that day marked a decisive win, one that gave me the confidence to move forward and rebuild with dignity. After the courtroom ruling, the reality of Tom's situation began to sink in, not just for him, but for everyone around him. His family, who had initially sided with him, started to see a different side of the man they thought they knew. Tom's mother called me one afternoon, her voice tinged with sorrow. She told me how Tom had painted me as controlling and cold, blaming me for driving him away. But when I calmly asked if he had mentioned emptying the joint account or charging his trip to our shared credit card, there was an awkward silence. She confessed that the family was beginning to question their support for Tom after seeing the messages he sent and learning about his financial misconduct. His sister Amanda even admitted she felt ashamed for ever believing his version of the story. As the weeks went on, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Tom and Melissa's dreams of a new life in Jacksonville were crumbling. They were stuck in a budget motel near the airport, struggling to pay for even basic expenses. Tom's personal credit cards were maxed out, another red flag I had noticed months before, but hadn't acted on publicly. His once confident demeanor faded as he faced mounting financial troubles and legal challenges. The company he worked for launched an internal investigation into his inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, resulting in a formal reprimand and the loss of a promotion. Friends and family began distancing themselves from him. The man who had seemed so sure of his escape was now isolated, living with his mother in Tampa and searching for ways to salvage what little he had left. Meanwhile, I focused on my boutique, which was thriving despite the drama. Word spread locally about the situation, and many women came into the shop to show support, some even sharing their own stories of betrayal and resilience. Tom's texts continued swinging between anger and manipulation. He claimed I had ruined everything, begged for reconciliation, and tried to claim credit for my business success. I didn't respond, instead, forwarding every message to my lawyer. Watching Tom's downward spiral was difficult, but also a reminder of the consequences of his choices. While he tried to rewrite his story, I was busy building a new one defined by independent strength and growth. The contrast between our paths couldn't have been clearer. Where Tom stumbled, I soared. Where he isolated himself, I built a community. His downfall was a painful but necessary part of my journey forward. Despite the chaos unfolding in my personal life, my boutique was a beacon of stability and growth. In the months after the divorce, I threw myself even more passionately into expanding the business that had become my sanctuary and my pride. I opened a second location in downtown Orlando, hiring 3 new employees to help manage the increased demand. We launched an online store which quickly gained traction beyond the local community, reaching customers across the state and even nationally. Each new milestone felt like a quiet victory, proof that I could rebuild and thrive on my own terms. The boutique was no longer just a shop. It was a symbol of resilience and empowerment. I welcomed young entrepreneurs seeking advice on protecting their assets and managing a business independently. Sharing my story became a way to help others avoid the mistakes I had seen and prepare for the unexpected. The media began to take notice, featuring my boutique and my journey as an example of success after adversity. Articles highlighted how I transformed a small local business into a growing enterprise, all while navigating the challenges of a painful divorce. Meanwhile, Tom struggled to find his footing. Word circulated that he was living with his mother in Tampa and had taken a lower-paying job after being let go from his previous position. His attempts to restart his career were hampered by his reputation and ongoing legal battles. Even Melissa, the woman who had seemed to be the cause of so much upheaval, moved on. She pursued further education and eventually launched her own social media consulting company. In a twist of irony, she became one of my regular customers, admiring how I built something lasting instead of chasing empty promises. Our paths were starkly different. While Tom's life unraveled, mine grew stronger and more vibrant every day. I focused on expanding the boutique to a third location and exploring new lines like luxury accessories. Each success was a reminder that betrayal and hardship do not have to define your future. With preparation, determination, and a clear vision, it's possible to create a life filled with purpose and achievement. Reflecting on those times, I realized that the boutique was more than a business. It was my way of reclaiming my identity and rewriting my story on my own terms. As I continued to build my business and reclaim my life, Tom's situation worsened. His personal and professional struggles became increasingly apparent to those around us. The company where he once worked launched an internal investigation into his relationship with Melissa, citing concerns about workplace conduct. The inquiry led to a formal reprimand and the loss of a promotion he had been anticipating for years. It was a significant blow to his career ambitions. Tom claimed age discrimination as a reason for being passed over, but colleagues and HR saw it as a consequence of his inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. The professional setbacks compounded his personal difficulties. Meanwhile, Melissa distanced herself from Tom. She moved out of the cramped studio apartment they had shared and began dating someone closer to her own age, someone with whom she shared more realistic goals and stability. Despite their rocky start, Melissa found success in her own right, earning a business degree and establishing a social media consultancy. Interestingly, she became a loyal customer of my boutique, often telling me that my story had inspired her to pursue something lasting instead of fleeting excitement. Tom's reputation suffered too. Mutual acquaintances shared stories of his desperate attempts to win Melissa back, only to be rebuffed repeatedly. His dating profile remained online but featured outdated photos and a description that no longer matched his reality. Living back with his mother in Tampa, Tom struggled with mounting debts and job insecurity. He tried various get-rich-quick schemes, including online gambling and questionable investments, only to dig himself deeper into financial trouble. Family ties weakened further as his relatives grew frustrated with his refusal to take responsibility for his actions. Calls from his mother became less frequent, and the support he once had slowly evaporated. Meanwhile, I focused on my boutique's growth, surrounded by a loyal team and supportive community. The contrast between our lives underscored the consequences of choices, both good and bad. Though it was difficult to witness Tom's downfall, reminded me why I had prepared so diligently. My foresight and strength had not only protected my assets, but also shielded me from the chaos that engulfed him. Years after that painful text from Tom, my life has transformed in ways I never imagined. The boutique I built has grown from a single shop into a flourishing business with 5 locations and a national online presence. But more than the financial success, it's the journey that has become my true legacy, one that I now share to inspire others. I've been invited to speak at women's business conferences, not to dwell on betrayal or divorce, but to talk about resilience, preparation, and protecting your dreams. I tell audiences about the importance of separating personal and business finances, trusting your instincts, and standing firm when faced with adversity. During one event, a woman asked me how to convince her spouse that keeping business and personal assets separate isn't paranoia, but wisdom. I shared my story, how my ex-husband once mocked my cautiousness, only to try to claim half of my business during our divorce. My message was clear: preparation is protection. Through media coverage and word of mouth, my boutique has become more than a store. It's a symbol of independence and strength for many women. Young entrepreneurs regularly visit seeking advice on how to build sustainable businesses and safeguard their futures. Tom's world is very different now. I've heard he finally moved into a small apartment after years living with his mother, taking a job far below his previous position. His dating life is complicated by the reputation he earned, and his professional prospects are limited. Interestingly, Melissa, who once sparked so much pain, has become a symbol of growth herself. She now runs a successful consulting company and credits my story for inspiring her to build something lasting rather than chasing illusions. In my office, I still keep the framed screenshot of Tom's final cruel text. It serves not as a painful reminder, but as proof of how far I've come. Above it hangs a sign that reads, "Success is the best revenge." At the 5-year anniversary of the original boutique, I addressed my team and customers, sharing how challenges had become opportunities. Tom's mother attended uninvited, and she told me about Tom's regrets and how he still doesn't fully understand what he lost. I smiled, knowing that what he threw away was never just property or money. It was the chance to grow alongside someone who never stopped believing in herself. My reflection in the store window showed a woman not diminished by age, but empowered by experience and wisdom. What started as a devastating betrayal became the catalyst for a new beginning, not just for me, but for every woman who hears my story and realizes she deserves better.